Oh, sure, yeah, something's it all up. Yeah.
Hello, old chum. If you stick around, you will hear about the Batman. He's kind of a big deal. Oh, wait, there we are. I found out what happened with the... Now I know what happened with everything. Hang on a second. Let's do that again. Are you guys ready?
Yes.
Okay. Hello, old chum. If you stick around, you will hear about the Batman. He's kind of a big deal. The Fantasmagorium is pleased to welcome you to Capes, Cowls, and Crusaders, a show about the Batman. The DC animated universe. There's a continuity in this universe? I did not know that. We just chose it because we wanted to break up the Bruce Timm shows with an adaptation. Truth be told, I just liked the Loeb and Lee run, and I hadn't seen the movie. Anyways, my name is Scotty R37. Cat is here, and we have a very special Bat contributor to help us be honest. Hey, Ernesto, what is going on?
Hello, hello. Buenas noches, mi gente.
Yes.
You should say Scott.
I'll let that one slide.
Thank you. Ernesto, please introduce yourself to the people and how you know so much about the man behind the mask.
Just your average Joe. One day he got up in the middle of the night and strolled into the living room back when VHS was still king of home physical media. And I found a movie called Batman Forever in VHS, and I put it on, and that's how I became exposed to the Dark Knight himself, Batman. And it was all like a big bundle of exposures because I became aware of Jim Carrey a lot more because of that movie, Tom Lee Jones. A lot of people don't know that Drew Barrymore was in that movie, so that was also kind of like a stark reminder. Oh yeah, that is who she is. And after that, I remember seeing Batman and Robin in theaters, and then I saw the Tim Burton Batman. So
Nice.
every time somebody tells me who's my Batman, well, obviously Kevin Conroy is always going to be my Batman because I discovered him through those movies. But at the same time, who was the first Batman I was exposed to? And that was Val Kilmer as Batman. And Batman Forever, it has a special place in my heart. And it wasn't until years later, right, when DC Comics decided to reboot their entire comic book line with the New 52, was my entry point into not just Batman comics, but Superman, with both titles that were on there, Superman and Action Comics, then Batman and Detective Comics, and then every other comic that came out, Wonder Woman, Flash, Green Lantern, Aquaman, you name it. And I even decided to ask a lot of my friends, hey, can you guys give me like a blueprint of every comic that came before the reboot? And I decided to curate and purchase issue by issue, not volumes like normal people do, but me, since I like to collect things physically, I bought the first issue, the entire collection of Crisis on Infinite Earths, issue by issue. I was able to buy issue number 1 of Batman from the New 52 reboot, and since we are going to be talking about Hush, I bought every single issue of Jeff Loeb and Jim Lee's run on the Hush storyline.
That's outstanding. And Kat, what was your first exposure to the Hush storyline, the book?
In the lead up to the Dark Knight, which I had anticipated a lot, I had just went online and started Googling the best Batman graphic novels because I didn't know anything about what was going on in the continuity. It's like, I don't know if I want to jump in randomly. And so I found a list on one of these countdown sites like comicbook.com or IGN or something that counted down a bunch of them, like Long Halloween, Dark Victory, Haunted Night, Batman, R.I.P., Prey, and Hush was one of them. And I just ordered a bunch of them and I read it and I really loved it. And I've read it several times over the last 15 years. But this movie, I first saw it in September 2019, and then I just watched it again today for the second time.
And what we're planning, ladies and gentlemen, all three of us who are watching and looking into the cameras, what we're planning on doing is we're going to go over the comic book storyline and then do the differences that the movie presents, the adaptation. Ernesto, did you see the movie first, or did you read the books first?
Oh, the books first.
Okay.
The movie didn't come out until years later.
We are going by audience chronology.
Yes, we are reviewing this nice comic, Batman Hush.
Yeah.
See, I'm not that fancy. I got a trade, and then I got a hardcover. It's 2 volumes.
Look at you. Look at you.
And I do have some of the flimsies, like I have a couple of the single issues, but I don't have the full collection. I've always looked for it. Well, I've got one of them right there.
Mm-hmm.
So, yeah. Hashtag favorite Riddler. Anyway. But yeah, okay. And so shall we discuss? Shall we go through? Is there any Bat news this week?
Yes, there's 2 bits of Bat news. One is Matt Reeves' Batman sequel, still untitled, has a release date of October 3rd, 2025. That's 2 years, 8 months away. So it'll be a while. But we'll be getting a Penguin series sometime next year, so that'll be good. That
It'll
starts
be a nice holdover.
Yep, a nice holdover for sure. And then they've also, with James Gunn's announcement of the new DC universe is going to be, we're going to get a Batman Brave and the Bold movie with a Damian Wayne Robin in it as well, and with the Bat family mentioned specifically. So it's going to be an older Batman, going to be pretty exciting, I take it, because it's going to be obviously further in his career because the family's established and he has a son and all that. And I take it Damian's not going to be like 10 or 12 like he is in some of the comic line. He'll probably be a little older because it would be kind of weird for maybe a 12-year-old assassin to be running around in a Batman movie. Maybe. I don't know. Can you see it, Ernesto, in a live action?
Oh, hell yeah. Especially after we got Hit Girl, we can definitely get a 10-year-old son of a bitch as Robin.
Yes.
And yeah, and I guess we'll discuss Brave and the Bold as more is released, but it's not supposed to come out until, is that coming out in 2025 as well, or is it just coming out?
No, there's no date, but me and Catherine were talking about the possibility of it coming out the year after.
All right.
James Gunn says there's going to be 2 movies and 2 TV shows per year, and the only thing they gave release dates for was for Superman Legacy, July 11th, 2025, and then the Batman 2 on October 3rd, 2025. So, even though the Matt Reeves thing is separate from, I think it's considered separate from the 2 movie a year rule thing because it's its own separate deal. But we figured it would probably take 3 or 4 years to get through everything they announced if they stick to that 2 shows, 2 movies a year. So.
Yes.
Well, and yeah, I look forward to that as developments occur. The introducing Damian Wayne as Robin is kind of, I don't know. That's the one you're going with? Okay. And especially after having reread Hush and the glowing recommendation that Bruce gives Tim Drake, but we'll get there. So we'll get there. So I guess the show, the book starts. It was written by Jeff Loeb and illustrated by Jim Lee, now editor-in-chief of DC.
Right now, yes.
Yeah.
And Scott is
he's the presidency of the comic division right now. Yes.
So he's done well for himself.
Yeah.
And Jeff Loeb said that when he was approached and was offered Jim Lee as the artist, he's like, I have no idea what the story's going to be. I have nothing about it, but if you're going to give me Jim Lee, I'll say yes and do it. It was actually 20 years ago now, New Year's Day 2003. There's a little prelude letter by Jeff Loeb in here where he's talking about that and how it's like, if you get Jim Lee, not only does the story have to be really good, but we owe him to do something new, like introduce a new major villain per se.
Yeah.
As they do in this story.
And the same thing happened again when they both worked on Superman in Superman for Tomorrow. Also by him and Jim Lee. That's why if you ever look for a Batman and Superman wallpaper, you're gonna get that iconic one where Batman is on top of a gargoyle sailing into wherever, and you get the same one for Superman during the day on top of a building. I think it was either an eagle or just a regular stand, and they're both looking at each other. That's how it came about. You have the cover for Hush, and then you have the cover for Superman.
And I think that is one, and that one was written by Brian Azzarello, if I'm not mistaken.
Correct. Yes.
Yeah. Yeah, those are both iconic and great covers. But we start off with the kidnapping of Edward, the heir of a chemical
He's the heir of a chemical
empire.
thing. He's been kidnapped by Killer Croc. Batman intervenes and thwarts the kidnap. Well, the kidnapping's already happened, but he saves the kid, delivers the ransom money, but he catches Croc, but the money gets stolen by Catwoman. He pursues her, and he didn't really know she was back in town, but he's chasing her. And as he's swinging like through the buildings on his cling wire, somebody cuts the line, and he falls into Crime Alley, fractures his skull, gets rescued by Huntress. He's taken back to the Batcave, and as Alfred's trying to figure out what to do, figuring like this is too complicated a job for me to patch up, Bruce just kind of uses Morse code to say Tommy Elliott, like call Tommy Elliott, a surgeon. And it's revealed through flashbacks that Tommy Elliott was Bruce's childhood friend. The relationship was kind of like Tommy Elliott would be like the Artful Dodger to Bruce's Oliver Twist, if you will. And so Tommy taught him how to play chess. He was more rambunctious. He could, as Bruce put it, he's the only one who could talk to his father in a very chillaxed, friendly type of way. On one occasion, when their father when Thomas Wayne took them to Metropolis, it says, "Wait by the car, don't do anything, or you're going to be stuck waiting in the hotel room all weekend." Well, one of the Green Lanterns flew by, and they were so shocked. And of course, Tommy's like, "We got to chase him." And Bruce is like, "No, but my dad." He's like, "Oh, come on. You're going to live your whole life like that? Come on, we got to go." And sure enough, they get caught, and they get stuck in the room for the whole weekend. And while Bruce is all depressed and pouting about it, Tommy's like, "This is no big deal." And so he teaches him how to play chess while they're there that weekend. And Bruce can't believe that. He's like, "How do you know you've already won? This is not possible. I just did this one move." He's like, "I've already planned 6 moves ahead." And so he teaches him all this. And through Batman's monologues, we see how he's really taken that to heart as a detective, as Batman. Tommy Elliott, back in the present timeline, we see is he's got a bit of an ego. He's boastful. He's a very popular surgeon. He's excited at the fact that operating on Bruce has gotten him a lot of great publicity.
Yeah.
And he orders him to, stay home, just chill out. Don't really, do anything after this, whatever. Of course, Batman doesn't follow doctor's orders. And so he goes to Arkham to talk to Killer Croc because he's like, "This isn't your style. You don't usually kidnap for ransom. What's going on?" Croc's not cooperative. So Batman surreptitiously places his tracking device on him. Croc breaks out. Amanda Waller's upset. Batman pursues him.
Amanda Waller is upset.
Yes.
All right.
As Batman is pursuing him, we find out that Catwoman had delivered the ransom to Poison Ivy per the plan. But Poison Ivy apparently used some of her pheromones or whatever to to escape from Catwoman because she's been, again, this is something that Catwoman normally wouldn't do either. Croc shows up as Batman's been following him, and at first Batman doesn't intervene because he wants to hear what they're going to talk about. And Croc is like, "Give me the money. I need it for my treatments, for my cure." And she's like, "I don't have it. Poison Ivy double-crossed us both." And he gets all angry with her. Batman intervenes, stops Croc from killing her. And as he's interrogating him, it seems like Croc is weak enough that he's going to crack. Not weak physically, but weak like mentally. He's going to crack and tell him. But then Amanda Waller shows up and spoils the party and takes him back to Arkham. And Catwoman thanks Batman, and she's like, "Come on, we've been through this flirtatious thing forever. Let's do something." And so they finally embrace on the rooftop, as depicted here on the back of the comic. And so from there, he talks with Catwoman. He's like, "What do we got to do?" And they track Poison Ivy to Metropolis. Bruce makes a cover story to go there. He's like, "Oh, I got to make this look like a business trip." So he goes to the Daily Planet, brings Lois a bunch of roses. Clark is kind of looking over the desk, kind of watching and making sure it doesn't go too far. And Bruce flirts with the idea of buying the Daily Planet off of them. Perry White shows up and greets them. "Oh, it's great."
No, he already owns it.
That's right. He already owns it. It's in the movie that he doesn't own it yet. So he greets. It's like, "Oh, everything's cool." But he does end up tracking Poison Ivy, and he finds out from her. He and Catwoman both corner her, basically. She wanted to have a little bit of a lead-in because she was upset and it didn't go well because, of course, Poison Ivy used her plants against her. Batman shows up, and they're trying to interrogate her, and it doesn't get very far because Superman shows up, and he's been bewitched by Poison Ivy as well, thanks to her own toxins and kryptonite pieces. So there's a battle, but Superman won't kill Batman, even though he's under Poison Ivy's spell and tries to fight them. To get out of it, Batman uses a combination of the kryptonite ring, and Catwoman goes to kidnap Lois Lane, and she drops Lois off a ledge, and Superman kind of snaps out of it and saves her. He's mad, and he's like, "You didn't tell," like he confronts Batman. He's like, "You didn't tell Catwoman about me and Lois." And he's like, "No, I just told her to kidnap someone close to you. So she had 3 choices: Jimmy Olsen, Perry White, or Lois. And she chose Lois. And he's like, you could have killed her. And he's like, no, I trusted you. And she would have caught her anyway if it came to that. And so at a dead end, they take Poison Ivy back to Arkham, or back to Gotham City. And back in Gotham, Tommy Elliott comes to visit. We find out through more flashbacks that Tommy's parents got seriously injured in a car accident. The chauffeur had wanted to accompany them that night, but they wouldn't go, but they insisted that he shouldn't go. And Bruce is like, oh, don't worry, Tommy, your parents will be fine. My dad's the best surgeon ever, I promise. But then after surgery, the father has died, the mother has survived. Tommy's upset. It's like, you promised, Bruce, and getting all upset. And that fractured the relationship permanently. Or at that time, well, I mean, it's seemingly permanently. That was the end of their childhood friendship. So we're learning a bit more about what's going on here. So Bruce takes Selina out on a date, and Selina doesn't know that Bruce is Batman yet. And so, but Bruce, of course, knows Selina is Catwoman. They go on a date, like a double date with Tommy Elliott, and brings on Leslie, and they go to the theater, or the opera rather, and they're watching the Pagliacci. And during the show, Harley Quinn suddenly shows up and attacks and sticks the whole place up, wanting to steal money, jewelry, all this kind of crap. And
Harley Quinn is Pagliacci in the comic version. She sneaks
that's right.
in.
See, that's the thing. I keep getting the two confused for the
Just trying to keeping us on the straight and narrow here, Kat.
Who
in the
watches
comic
Catwoman?
version, Batman, like, this isn't her style either. She doesn't usually do jobs this big. What's going on? But she does snatch a jade pendant from Tommy. He's like, no one takes anything from me ever. And he chases her down into a back alley. Batman has to save Catwoman from falling off a balcony, and that means he's fallen behind. And by the time he catches up into the alley, he finds Tommy Elliott lying apparently dead. And you have a panel, which is one of my all-time favorite panels for the Joker.
Really?
Right here. Now that's how you make an entrance.
Yeah.
And then, of course, Batman's rage is unleashed because the Joker has apparently just killed Tommy Elliott. He starts choking him out, wanting to kill him, and Catwoman and Huntress both try and stop him, but he knocks both of them out in the process, and it's eventually he runs through his head all the horrible things Joker has done. And then the MVP, Jim Gordon, arguably the nicest person in the DC universe, shows up because Joker killed his wife, his daughter, and all that kind of stuff. And he's like, no, you can't do this. We did it by the book last time. I'm not going to let you become him, or I'm dragging you off to Arkham as well. And so he finally...
But first things first, because Catwoman tries to stop Bruce first. And it's like, I won't let you become what you hate the most. And then he's like, what if the Joker does this to her? And then basically just hits her once. And then Jim jumps in.
Yeah.
But it is important. I was, in terms of the comparison between the two, I was trying to remember if the romance was as overt in the comics as it was in the movie. And I found yes.
Yeah,
but
and so he's feeling really guilty about that.
Yeah, believe me, with the Hush book is the first time where the relationship between Batman and Catwoman was finally solidified, and it became not just a classic relationship, but the relationship to read.
Yeah, and we also find out in this scene, as I haven't mentioned, but throughout these encounters, you've seen the Hush character and all the bandages standing in the shadows, commenting about the meaning of friendship and stuff. But this time, after Batman agrees to let the Joker live, we see Hush flipping a coin, and it's the Two Faces coin, and we're like, oh. Back in the Batcave, Batman's conferring with Oracle, and they find out that the gun that was used was not. It probably wasn't the Joker. It was a former gun that used to be owned by Jim Gordon. It's a police service pistol. This is not something that he would normally use. Tim Drake shows up, starts talking to Batman about this whole Catwoman thing, and he's like, maybe you should just be with her and tell her and all of that type of stuff. Bruce doesn't want to talk about it. And
no, it's Dick. It's Dick is Nightwing.
That's right. That's right. Tim Drake. So he's talking to Dick about all of this, and through that we get monologuing in his head, and he goes through the different relationships with Robin. He says Dick being Robin was more about him coping with the loss of his parents, but he really needed to do his own thing as Nightwing. Whereas Tim Drake or Jason Todd was rather treating Robin as being a game, which is probably why he died. And that Tim Drake is the one who actually aspires to be the most like me, like an actual detective, and is really good at it.
Yes.
And so Batman, meanwhile, is telling Dick about this enemy that he has. It's like, look, he's manipulated Killer Croc, Catwoman, Poison Ivy, Harley Quinn, the Joker. And it goes as high as Superman, as low as the Joker. It's like, what do we do? And he's like, well, we'll figure it out. We'll just calm down. And then they get a call from Alfred saying, or the Oracle rather, saying that the Riddler has hijacked an armored truck with $11 million, and his riddle is what has four wheels and $11 million that flies. And they're like, well, this is kind of standard Riddler stuff. I wonder what's up. Like maybe this new character hasn't gotten to him, or this new foe hasn't gotten to him yet. Maybe he's just leaving him out. What's up? So as they take off in the Batmobile, Dick keeps pestering Bruce about Catwoman. It's like, oh, why don't you pursue it? It's gonna be really good because it's kind of aware of what's going on. And he's like, it's none of your business. It's like, you're right, it is none of your business. They keep out of it. But he must have taken his sayings to heart, because after he catches the Riddler, and Riddler, of course, gets taken away, he, aside from finding Ash from the Lazarus pit left at the scene, he actually does decide to go and meet Catwoman. And he takes off his cowl, and she's shocked that it's Bruce, but she's not like upset or anything. And he's kind of nervous at first, but then they just embrace, and it's like, oh, maybe this is going to work out. Meanwhile, Hush, the person we think is Hush, shows up at Arkham, and he bails the Joker out of jail, or Blackgate, or he's at the police station still, and he bails him out because he's like, look, I know you didn't kill Tommy Elliott. And he takes off the bandages, and Joker's like, Harvey? He's like, Two-Face, that's you? And he's like, no, not Two-Face anymore, I'm Harvey. Admittedly, I thought this in the comic was a bit of a contrived plot point, because, okay, even though the Joker's innocent of this, you still have him for a litany of other things. They wouldn't just let you, it's like, okay, we'll drop this charge, but it's not like we're going to let you go for this. But they kind of do that in the comic, which I was like, okay, I was kind of weirded out by that, but whatever.
Well, I kind of forgive it because you skipped over Crypto. You skipped over Crypto. Like Crypto, Superman's dog is in this comic book, so there is still the comic book contrivances of the Batman universe.
Well, that one, I mean, in terms of, because they have other supernatural stuff in here as well. It's like Clayface's stuff, so I don't have a problem with Crypto because it's in that type of. But the idea that the Gotham police, because they even talk about the litany of crimes the Joker has committed in this story, like things that would give you multiple life sentences, but no, we got to let him go just because he didn't kill this one guy. But it's like, okay.
All right, you got me. You got me.
It's comics, people. Accept it.
Yes, it's comics.
How's Batman supposed to catch him if he doesn't get away?
Yes, so Batman goes back to the Batcave, and he's fine, and he's thinking about what is the Lazarus pit, what is the ash from the Lazarus pit here? Like, what does this have to do with it? But he sees Ra's al Ghul has left a sword behind from one of the League of Assassins, one of his assassins for sure. He freaks out. He's like, oh, God, Alfred. And he runs upstairs and finds that Alfred's all right. He's like, oh, this is odd. So then he follows the clue from the sword that takes him to North Africa. He's like, oh, I've been here before, but now I'm here on a different errand. He's talking to Ra's al Ghul, and he's like, look, you've kidnapped my daughter because that's something that I forgot to mention. Batman did do that. He kidnapped Talia from a LexCorp jet in flight, left her with Catwoman for safekeeping, because he knew that would get him a meeting with Ra's al Ghul. That's slightly tweaked. Then they do mention in the scene that Lex Luthor is president of the United States.
Yes.
I'm not familiar with the storyline that led to that, but okay, he's president.
Yeah,
I am.
Again, another storyline that was written by Jeff Loeb too.
So Batman goes to meet Ra's al Ghul, and he's like, I'll challenge you to this. If you beat me in the duel, I'll help you find out who this mystery foe is. But if you fail, then you're going to have to give me back my daughter and suffer the consequences. So they get in a big fight. Bruce wins, and Ra's al Ghul tells him, yeah, somebody used my Lazarus pit, and it's defiled. It can't be used anymore. I don't know who it was. Batman's not sure if he's telling the truth, but given that his daughter's life is at stake, or at least Ra's thinks his daughter's life is at stake, Batman decides to trust him. Meanwhile, Catwoman is confronted by Lady Shiva, who is one of the League of Assassins members, and Talia isn't really pleased with this because she doesn't want her father in her life in any way at all, even though Lady Shiva is kind of here to save her. And Shiva does beat the shit out of Catwoman, but Talia gets free and defeats Shiva. And Batman shows up in the nick of time, and he takes Catwoman all injured back to the Batcave, because she already knows she is anyway. And in the Batcave, she meets Dick, and then she meets Alfred, and she's like, and they all know her real name. He's like, what? She's like, does everybody know this? He's like, no, just Dick and Tim. He's like, I had to tell Tim before he was gonna find out. But Alfred, but don't worry, Gordon and the cops, they don't know that at all. So he's like, look, we have to figure this out. Somebody's manipulating all these people. They manipulated you. Like, what the hell's going on? I can't figure it out. Now the Lazarus pit is involved, and somebody's using that. And she's like, well, I know. But before she could really pursue it any further, Tim Drake shows up to antagonize Catwoman. He drives her to leave by pissing her off enough, and Tim's like, you think it worked? And Bruce is like, yeah, it probably worked. She takes off and goes to find Huntress, and Huntress is acting all crazy, saying that she took the money from this guy so that way she could upgrade her equipment. And Catwoman's like, what the hell are you talking about? I have no idea what you're on about. And Batman has been secretly following, and he finds out that she's under the influence of Scarecrow's toxin. Scarecrow shows up and he's singing the nursery rhyme "Hush, Hush, Little Baby" about a kid that basically can never be satisfied, and he runs through virtually every verse of the song as a Batman and Scarecrow fight. He defeats Scarecrow, thinking that Scarecrow was the mastermind. He finds out that he wasn't, and then out of the blue, Hush shows up with Tim Drake as hostage, and he's unmasked as Jason Todd. And Batman's like, what the hell? You died. What's going on? And they get in a fight. And he's like, you're so much like Jason. What's going on? Then he finds out it's actually Clayface. And he's like, okay, this is really kind of cunning.
But this is the moment in the comic that he starts to piece it all together, because he's like, if this was actually something is really messed up, because
it's not Scarecrow, it's not Clayface. It's like they're not the masterminds. Like what's going on here?
If they actually knew who I was, they would use my name. No one is calling me Bruce in a story that is basically about him trusting people enough to know that he is Bruce. It's great. Yes.
But he also finds out at the end of this fight that in a plot point that later gets retconned in other stories, which was a bit unfortunate because I thought the mystery was interesting, is even though this wasn't Jason Todd, he finds out that Jason Todd's actual body is missing from the grave and from his grave, and he doesn't know what the hell's going on, and he's pissed off. So he goes back to consult with Oracle. He's like, we got to get to the bottom of this now. And here's the thing: whoever this is, these other villains aren't using my name, so they don't know me. But the fact that this person knew everything. He knew everything about my rogues gallery. He knew how to manipulate everybody. This guy, he has to know me in some way. Like, what's going on here? And she's like, hey, Bruce, out of curiosity, what made you ask for Tommy Elliott? It's like, you didn't just ask for him. You used Morse code specifically. Like, why did you? He's like, he's a brilliant surgeon. And he's like, why? What are you getting at? And she points out that there's been like apparently an attempt at subliminal messaging hacked into his network, flashing like these little quick flashes, kind of like the subliminal flashes of Tyler Durden in the early reels of Fight Club. Yeah. And he's like, and Batman's like, well, there's only one person who could have done that. Harold, a character who disappeared during the No Man's Land arc, who Batman used to employ to be. He's like, the guy's a mute. He has other physical disabilities, but he's a genius when it comes to machines. It's like he's the machine whisperer. He's brilliant, and he's always kept my secret, trusted him. And so Oracle helps him track him down. They meet at a bridge, and they're talking. And he's like, "Oh, you could talk. Like, what's going on?" And he's like, "Sorry, I didn't do any. I didn't betray you fully. I helped this guy spy in the Batcave, but I didn't give any key information away. I didn't tell him who you were or anything." And he's like, "Why did you do it?" And he's like, "Well, the guy was able to fix my voice. He's fixed my all this kind of stuff." And then Bruce kind of figures it out. He's like, "Of course, he's like somebody." It's like Croc said he was offered like an opportunity to be, basically fixed, and you have this guy was actually fixed from here. Yeah, it's like a surgeon. Tom, like what the hell is going on? And then before Harold can tell him who it is, he's shot dead by Hush. And this is where you have the big showdown, and Batman and Hush get in a big fight. And no matter how blatantly he tells him who he is and why he did what he did, Batman still doesn't really want to believe him. And the big revelation is that Hush is Tommy Elliott, that he didn't actually die. That was Clayface. And the reason he hates Bruce is because he secretly cut the brake lines on his parents' car as a kid, convinced the chauffeur to stay home that night, wanted both of his parents dead to inherit the money and, run off with the money, be rich and all that kind of stuff. And he's jealous that Bruce got you're lucky because your parents died and you got to inherit all that money and all that kind of stuff. And Bruce is kind of totally sidewinded by this, but he still doesn't want to believe him because he's like, no, like you don't know enough about my rogues. How could you have done this? And he wants to unmask him because he still doesn't want to believe it. And before he can, Hush gets the upper hand, seems about ready to kill Batman, but then he gets shot by Harvey Dent, of all people, and falls into the river. Despite Superman's help, they don't find Hush's body, Tommy's body. He's just gone. A story which later gets something which was recently revealed actually in 2022 in a new epilogue by Jim Lee, saying that there was a secret subboat, like a submarine type boat under the water that he escaped in. But then Batman now has finally figured out. He went through the records and he goes back to Arkham. He's like, I should have seen it before. But you're not really a wild. We don't know who he's talking to at first. But he's like, you're not really a wild genius at this type of stuff. He's like, that's kind of the point, wasn't it? And he's like, why? Like, what? How did you manipulate all these people? And he's like, well, Killer Croc, he's an idiot. Mind you that. So we just told him about the cure because I got Scarecrow to give him a virus, and we were going to cure it during surgery. And it's like Poison Ivy. Yeah, she wanted the money and the opportunity to work with Catwoman. And then Harley couldn't resist the urge of working with Joker. And Joker was hard. You might have thought Joker was hard to get, but he couldn't resist the Clayface joke with Jason Todd. He thought that was going to be fantastic. And Harvey, we got him because we fixed him up. Granted, we didn't think he would be cured of his insanity when doing that. Granted, I'm not clear what Harvey actually did for him, because apparently they had an agreement. Because when he showed up on the bridge, Hush was mad, and Two-Face Harvey's like, well, agreements were made to be broken. But the only thing Harvey has done in the story up to this point is observe and get the Joker out of jail, even though the Joker didn't show back up in the storyline. So I'm not really clear exactly what Two-Face did for him.
He does. He does. Like Harvey goes to Jim and says, "We gotta help Bats."
Right, but what did Hush want him to do in the first place? Like, why did he offer to fix him? Like, what was the trade-off that he expected to get?
Oh, good question. I don't know.
Yeah, I don't know either. But so he's like, oh, you got all these people, and he's like, well, how'd you figure it out? And he's like, well, I finally had to. I knew Tommy didn't know all this stuff about me, but I went through Tommy's medical records, and because obviously Lazarus Pit, somebody was dealing with some type, probably a fatal illness for sure, and I found that Arthur Wynn, that Tommy Elliott had failed to cure him of his problem. And Arthur Wynn, the man who invented the crossword puzzle, and then we realize he's talking to the Riddler, and that the Riddler had used the Lazarus Pit, and as it does, it gives you enlightenment. It causes you to go a little mad. He figured out that Bruce Wayne was Batman. He went to Tommy Elliott, or went back. Tommy Elliott offered up a solution to his mother's cancer with the Lazarus Pit. But then Tommy, knowing this guy was Riddler, knew he wouldn't turn him in. He's like, actually, I hate my mom. I want her to die. He tells her about him, and then they came up with this brilliant plan to really humiliate and destroy Batman, kind of like in Skyfall, where Silva doesn't just want to kill him; he wants to drive her mad and destroy her reputation and all that. Which is why Riddler and Hush went through this ridiculously convoluted plan to drive Batman up the wall. And of course, Riddler loves that because he loves a good mystery and a good puzzle. And Riddler's like, yeah, everything went kind of it went kind of well, and I'm a genius, and ha ha ha. And Bruce finally gets him. He's like, there's two things. One, Ra's al Ghul is not going to forgive you if he finds out you used his Lazarus Pit, and he's going to send all of the League of Assassins after you. Secondly, here's a riddle for you. What happens when what time is it when an elephant sits on a fence? And Riddler's like, well, it's time to get a new fence. Go figure. Like, what the hell? It's a worthless riddle. He's like, exactly. If you tell people I'm Batman that about my secret identity, then it's worthless and it means nothing to you. And he's like, he thinks about it. He's like, God damn it. And then he's like, and then one other question, really, why Jason Todd? Why bring him into this? He's like, well, how many times have you beat me, Batman? 5, 10, 100 times. I wanted to really, you always rub it in my face. I really wanted to rub it into yours. He's like, where's the bot? And so Batman just punches him really hard, and the guard runs in. He's like, what happened? He fell. And I love that. And so he leaves Riddler behind. He goes back to Catwoman, and they meet, and they're rendezvousing, and they're talking, and he's trying to, he explains to her the final piece of the puzzle, that it was all Riddler and blah blah blah. And she tries to shut him up because she's not interested. It's like, good, the bad guy's gone, presumably dead. You got Riddler, whatever. And so she says, hush to him. And he freaks out because he's not sure if she was in on it or not. And she's really put off by Batman suddenly not trusting her when they were pursuing this relationship. And so she kind of takes off, and that's the end of the story. But it's neat because they basically elevated the Batman and Catwoman relationship quite a bit.
Yes.
Now, on the film side of things, they make some major differences. First of all, they establish that Bruce and Tommy Elliott are friends already. Like, they've been friends or whatever, and he's dating Selina at the beginning. Instead of Killer Croc, they swap, as the kidnapper, they swap him with Bane. Bruce and Selina sleep with each other quite a lot, a couple times in this. It's like getting serious a lot faster. When they corner Poison Ivy, she actually does tell them about this mysterious Hush character, which wasn't in the comic. Two-Face is not in it at all, so Joker doesn't get out of jail. He doesn't shoot the guy on the bridge. The whole climax is different as well, because once once they go to the cemetery and meet Scarecrow does kind of distant Grayson out of the picture with the fear gas, and then he's like, I can't fail, and Catwoman kind of punches him out and gets kidnapped by Hush. And then we find out Batman had already pieced the puzzle together by this point in the film version and goes to Arkham to talk to Riddler, who's in a jumpsuit instead of his classic Riddler gear. And they basically have the same conversation that they have in the comic, where he tells them everything about it except the reveal is that it's actually Clayface. And it's like, oh, if this guy in Arkham is actually Clayface, then where's Riddler? And we find out that in this major departure is that the Riddler is Hush. He wanted to reinvent himself after finding out who Batman was, and manipulating the Rogues Gallery is his way of getting revenge on those who disrespected him. And he knows Batman's going to show up to try and save Catwoman, and he does. But Batman insults the hell out of the Riddler, saying, you use a bunch of riddles that 5-year-old or 5th graders can solve. You're a one-trick pony. You're nothing. And he gets angry. He's like, take it back. And of course, because of this, there is no backstory to Tommy Elliott whatsoever. They completely axed that, and Tommy Elliott is actually dead in this iteration. It wasn't a joke. And also the way that he manipulated. I like the way in the movie that the way he manipulated Harley was by kidnapping the Joker. I thought that made more sense, because to me, in the comic, when he says, oh, Harley couldn't resist the urge to work with Joker, it's like, well, aren't they like buddy, but don't they do that all the time anyway? It's like I kind of like that change in the movie. But another major change, aside from finding out that Hush is Riddler, is Batman tries to save him as this whole power plant thing is falling apart, and Catwoman's like, get the fuck out of here, basically, and she's like, fuck this, and she cuts the line, and he falls to his death. Or I assume he's dead and didn't get out of it. I haven't seen the following films of the continuity.
But it does still fall under the same storyline as the comic, because Batman still has trust issues, and because of those trust issues, he and Catwoman, by that point in the comic book, can't be together. Here, it's blatant. It's like, I could have saved him, and even though she's like, well, you don't have to save someone like that, you know, you're too important, but he's just like, yeah, but what if I could? The reason I do this is to find the one person whose life I could save, rehabilitate. And for her, it's like, I'm sorry, you're crazy. You can't depend on the kindness of these people.
It's funny. That's what the screenwriters of Batman Returns said when they were watching The Dark Knight, and they're like, okay, the Joker's whole thing is that he's trying to corrupt Batman and get him to kill him, which is why he's laughing when he's thrown off the scaffold at the end of the movie, because he figures, I finally done it. But the writer's like, dude, the people are making such a big deal of the Nolan and other things that Batman doesn't kill, but we had him kill in the Batman Returns movie, because he's like, by all means, you got to kill the Joker. He's blown up a hospital. He's escaped from jail. Kill. He's like, by all means, kill Heath Ledger. And those are the words he used. Not necessarily the nicest words to use, all things considered, but it's like, they're like, yeah, he kind of had the writer had the same feelings that Catwoman did in the Hush movie, that you're crazy, because yes, you may like save Riddler's life, but not his mental state. He's never going to change. But he saved it. But he tried to save him anyway. And so that's the movie.
And the thing is that most of these villains, they've never had compassion. They've never had somebody try to save them from their madness. So when somebody who is, when you think about it, as crazy as they are, because, you know, man dressed as a bat using all his wealth to fight crime instead of actually using the wealth the way it's supposed to. Even if you really read the comics to this day, Batman does use his wealth to fix things. The thing is that he's still the crime fighter. So here you have a character that, okay, he's as crazy as they are, but he still wants to help them. He still wants to rehabilitate them. Even with the Joker, and we've seen a lot of adaptations where the Batman goes to the Joker, it's just like, I can rehabilitate you. Let me help you. But at the end of the day, as Catwoman has mentioned in the movie, and as you always see in most comic book adaptations and in the comic themselves, some of these people are beyond saving, but Batman is still going to try to fight the good fight.
Yeah.
Well, and also I think that one of the big things about Batman is that he is not I don't think that it's necessarily that he is fighting the good fight or that he wants to rehabilitate. I think that he's taken the responsibility that I do not have the hand to kill anyone. I cannot take away a life the same way that my parents' life was taken away from me.
Yeah, and it also always depends on who is the person writing Batman at that point. What is the message they're trying to convey? Is it a Batman who wants to make sure that no other kid has to lose their parents in a dark alley with some guy with a gun? Is it a Batman who is constantly every year counting down how many lives have died this year versus last year? This year was 1,000, last year it was 5,000. Because of the Batman being around, I was able to save 4,000. Once I get to 0, then the Batman is no longer needed. It really depends on who is writing Batman and what is the point of Batman.
Right, because that was something that Denny O'Neil mentioned in an interview in 2008, that he said what the big thing that separated, like, yeah, Batman does go and beats up a lot of guys, and yeah, some writers have interpreted it to be him exacting vengeance, to avenge, not so much avenging as it is just revenge. But the big difference is, at the end of the day, for decades, as he said, for the writing, is that Batman will not take a life, and that's something that they keep trying to push in more recent comics of the recent decades, even though the movies and the early comics had him killing a lot. And then Nolan, of course, really put his foot down on that with his trilogy, which seems to be when you had the uproar from people complaining anytime Batman killed anybody, which is why in the Zack Snyder films where Batman kills a lot, people were freaking out, because I guess the Nolan thing was so ingrained in them that they couldn't fathom that, even though just some years earlier in the Burton movies, he was killing people all the time and they didn't care that much then either. Well, a couple times they did if it was blatant and unnecessary, like when in Batman Returns, when he puts the bomb on the clown.
People cared, but social media wasn't around.
Yeah, that's probably true. But yeah, so that's another point to it. But I really like the Hush story because of the whole mystery of it. Like, on the one hand, it seems kind of obvious that they're saying, oh, it's got to be Tommy Elliott. But once Elliott died in the alley, which I thought was a great misdirect, because I bought it. I mean, even though the Joker's holding the gun and you can see it's a fake gun, like it has a flag hanging up as a fake gun, I still thought it was him, that he'd actually killed him. And it's like, oh, because I was kind of surprised up to that point. I guess it wasn't Tommy Elliott, and they're going to use Batman's rage over losing yet another great friend to drive this home, and we're going to find out it's somebody else. Since Harvey was flipping the coin, and I thought, ooh, maybe it is Two-Face. Because he used to know, before being Two-Face, he knew Bruce is Harvey. Maybe he figured it out. So I thought that the mystery that way remained really engaging, in a way that Mask of the Phantasm wasn't for me. Because in that instance, I thought it was so obvious who Phantasm was and where they were going with it. Whereas with here at Hush, and I was reading, because I first saw Phantasm around the same time I read this book. And so reading Hush, it's like, oh, this is like a really great mystery, and I'm intrigued by it. And I didn't really think of Clay, because Clayface is one of those villains who's so out there in terms of just being able to do all this shit that he's able to do, that I didn't even think about him being in the story, more or less, for any reason, until they finally brought it up towards the edge. And I'm like, oh. And then the other thing I should mention, the plot point that got retconned, was that Jason Todd's body wasn't really missing anymore, because they did the Under the Red Hood storyline where they retconned his death, which I'm not really a fan of, because I like the fact that it's some universes, when you kill a major character, that they stay dead. You feel something for them.
However, there is also an adaptation change as well when they adapted the comic to the film, because in the film, it was the Lazarus pit that brought him back. But in the comics, it was Superboy Prime punching a hole in the universe and resetting everything.
Right.
Again,
yeah. So yeah, I love this story. I like that character, and the fact that it's not just that. And similar to the Long Halloween, where they imply that there's multiple holiday killers. In this instance, because they had Two-Face in the bandages, because they keep suggesting Tommy, it's like you're kind of going around in this carousel, figuring out, well, who's the mastermind and what's going on. And like at first, when Batman encounters the Riddler in the armored car, and he's like, oh, Hush, why is Hush leaving him out of this? Or why is the mystery foe leaving him out of this? And my first thought was, well, maybe he just hasn't got to him yet. Which is why I didn't really pick up on it. And another clue I forgot to mention is that the Batmobile blew its left tire because of another weapon that Hush put into place, and that falling into Crime Alley wasn't just a mistake, because that's where Bruce first met Jason Todd, trying to steal the left front tire of the Batmobile, which is why it was the left tire that came off. So he's providing these other subtle clues. Which again is really fun, because like you read it the first time and it's like, oh, and then I go back and reread it again. I'm like, how did I miss all this? Now, admittedly, certain things I didn't pick up on, like the Herald character I'd never been familiar with, because I hadn't read No Man's Land at that time. I still haven't read it, or the ones beforehand. I haven't ever heard of that character, and I thought, oh, okay. But yeah, I mean, for the most part, I thought it was really good. I take it the reason they swapped Killer Croc with Bane in the movie has to do with their continuity, maybe.
It would, because if we're following the DC animated movie universe, which is where the Hush storyline is being adapted, there is the Robin, Son of Batman adaptation, which was adapting the Grant Morrison run when they introduced Damian Wayne. There is a Killer Croc use in there, and he's acting and behaving the same way he is in the Hush comic book, except in the movie adaptation, he's got this gene therapy use that's making him more violent and more crazy for lack of a better term. So, hey, and it's like, okay, well, we already did Killer Croc. It doesn't make sense to use him again. It's going to feel like we're copy pasting what we did in that adaptation. Let's use Bane, because in this animated universe that started in Justice League War after the Flashpoint Paradox, and then 15 movies later, that's all the movies. Most of them were Batman, if you think about it. It's like, okay, hey, we haven't seen Bane. Let's use Bane.
Well, and also I thought they did sort of address the fact that it was Bane and that he was acting out of character, like Alfred even says.
Yeah,
Isn't he a
more
little less?
Shakespeare? Yeah.
Isn't he a little less eloquent than usual? And it was like, it must be the new Venom. Oh, okay. So when it comes to last week, we watched Mask of the Phantasm with Kevin Conroy. I'm sorry, Jason O'Mara. This is not a fair comparison, but
a fair comparison.
It was so flat. How did you feel about the animation style and the adaptation between the comic book and the movie?
Want me to go first?
I don't care.
I like the animation, but not as striking as some of it was really bad. Like, for instance, the Joker in the alley with the gun, like that looks so bad compared to it. And the whole segment where Batman's trying to kill the Joker is such much better iconic panels in the comic than in the movie version, because there's so many. Because you got Jim Lee animating this, so of course it's going to be fantastic. Like, it's just like, where's the picture that you have? This type of, it's like he's totally. Look at you see the blood and it's like totally just a lot more graphic. It's a lot more vicious, and it's like, damn.
Yeah, it's kind of like the blessing and a curse of adapting something to animation, because there's always a budget, unfortunately, and these movies weren't making as much as they did before streaming, before digital downloads and everything. These movies were like direct to DVD. That term was still happening. Exactly. You see all the colors, the shadows, the rotoscoping, the positioning, the lighting, all that stuff. If they really wanted to adapt it page by page and panel by panel, it would be expensive as hell. So what is the compromise? Jim Lee on a budget. When they did Justice League War, which was based on the origins from New 52, which is the beginning of the Justice League back in 2011, they rebooted the animated universe. They used that comic to be the launch pad for this new animated series. And they basically did, like I said, Jim Lee on a budget. All the characters are going to look the same. It's going to be the same animated style, the same look and feel. And if you just really look at how Batman and everybody else looks and compare it to how Jim Lee designs them, they all have the same square jawline. They all have, it is basically Jim Lee. That's the inspiration, but on a budget. Because if they really wanted to make it look exactly like his style, exactly how it's all composition, it's going to be too expensive.
Well, they did an adaptation of Son of Batman. I remember seeing one where Batman goes to a temple where Damian Wayne was at. I saw that one. And it seemed like a very similar, like it seemed like the animated style of the adaptations or post New 52, the animated universe. And that style has never really connected with me because it's not anime enough, but it's not like G.I. Joe enough. And it's not stylistic enough to be Bruce Timm. And so I agree with you that yes, it is Jim Lee on a budget, and it just never connected with me. It was just and then with the flat vocal performances, I was surprised to find out that there were actors in this movie that I liked, like Peyton List from isn't she from the Orville? She plays Alara on the Orville, and then with my stars, the lady doctor from House. What's her name?
Oh,
and then
Cuddy?
No, not Cuddy.
The one of the three. Gotcha.
Yeah, exactly. See, and I don't know. There was something about the voice. I don't know. The adaptation itself felt flat and lackluster, and when they tried to enhance it, there were far more explosions.
But you can never go wrong with Rebecca Romijn as Lois Lane.
Lois Lane, there's a reason why. I don't know. You got to get a more dynamic vocal actor. You can't play sultry. If you've been on camera your entire life,
Yeah,
Like, I don't
Vanessa Williams in there. Jeffrey Arend, Jerry O'Connell as Superman.
Jerry O'Connell was Superman? Yeah, but Jerry O'Connell's
Wilson
on
as Lex
lowered.
Luthor.
Yeah, Rainn Wilson needed a little bit more bass in his voice. I'm so used to Clancy Brown.
But he did fit the Lex Luthor stereotype when you think about it.
Yeah, so the animation wise, I mean, I like the shine to it a bit compared to say Mask of the Phantasm. This has got a little bit more of an animation shine to it, but I mean, I get why they can't recreate the panels in terms of the amount of different lines and angles in there because it would be too expensive for the shadowing. But I figured some shots they recreated, like when Batman is chasing Catwoman in the beginning. There's a shot kind of low angle of the homeless people around the fire, and you see them flying by, and they did that. So I just wanted to see more of that, like certain recreations of certain panels that they didn't do very much of. And then I didn't even think about it, but the riddle that the Riddler tells towards the end is that the less of them you have, the more one is worth. It's like a friend. I'm like, oh, Matt Reeves must have seen this movie because that's not in the comic. But so that was there. But I just, so the animation was fine. But I get it. It's on a budget. But do we know why they made the major change to have it be Riddler instead of Tommy Elliott and just completely getting rid of that?
I don't know the exact answer, but I have to believe is that at some point when they were mapping out the storyline with Jeff Loeb and Jim Lee, it was when you're reading it, just take Tommy being Hush out of it. The Riddler's manipulating all of this. At some point, when you reread it, it almost feels like it should have been the Riddler the whole time.
Oh, so he's effing with Batman the entire time. He's leading him by the nose. Everyone is in on this. How could this be possible? And you still end up just with Eddie Nigma. He dipped into a Lazarus pit. He got he was right. He guessed right. And he had all the means, opportunity, and availability with his newfound powers and lack of dying. He could have just done it and he didn't need Tommy. But I think that Tommy was the impetus. He was the one.
And at the same time, with Tommy here, it's a brand new character. And in later stories, he becomes a seminal part of the Rogues Gallery, not just a one-off.
See, and I appreciate what you're saying in terms of it being like, if we're critiquing the story as a whole, I think you need Tommy in there to get under Bruce's skin. Mm-hmm. Just to be able to manipulate him that much. And what I read in the book is that Tommy wanted to mess with Bruce, and Riddler thought it was a really good idea that's the way he should just absolutely destroy Batman, is destroy Bruce.
Yeah.
And also there's a part in the whole story and that is more overt in the Batman story, is that maybe Selina and Bruce were under the influence of Poison Ivy's sort of pheromones from the beginning, because Dr. Fraser Crane says, why isn't my toxin working on you unless your mind is already under the influence? And then Batman brings that up at the end. And that's part of the reason. That's part of the reconciliation or the dissolution of that's why Batman and Catwoman are in love. They know who they are. They know who they are. And you know what? It's like, you're messed up. So are you. Yeah. And it's irreconcilable differences, but they're perfect together. But they have one argument.
Yeah, but if you read comics for as long as these two have been around, it makes sense that they are.
Absolutely.
It makes sense that this is why in Hush it became the most popular storyline in the Batman series, because it was starting to lay the groundwork for what would be cemented as the relationship. Not Vicky Vale, not Zatanna, not any other person, not Wonder Woman, even though that's a fan favorite in the Bruce Timm universe. It's
really
Selina Kyle.
Yeah, I always thought that.
Yeah, so I gotta get that as well, because I mean, I do remember that was a big deal when a general resurgence in Batman popularity amongst mainstream audiences when The Dark Knight came out, because the sales for a while, some of them I couldn't even get because they're like, we're waiting to restock. They were just selling them left, right, and center. But it is funny because I'll go online, I'll Google like what are the 10 best Riddler stories or Penguins or whatever when I want to get back into a character, and Hush is always at the top of the list for the Riddler stories. And it made me, I'm guessing you might be right about that, which is why they changed it, because it's like, oh yeah, the Riddler's in it, but like he hijacks an armored car, and then at the very end you have that one conversation, even though he is the mastermind. But I agree with Scott that I like that Tommy Elliott, what he contributes to the story and becoming a seminal villain later on. I did, however, misremember the ending. For some reason, I thought the ending was Batman fighting Hush and knocking him off the bridge and being worried that he thinks he might have accidentally killed him, because that would obviously nag at him since he nearly killed the Joker. But that's not what happened. It was Harvey that came up and shot him.
Yeah.
But yeah, so that might be why they changed it. Because I haven't seen any of the animated. I don't think I've seen any of the animated films since then. I don't know if did they retcon the Riddler's death? Do we know, or is he actually dead now in that continuity?
No, they always come back.
No, in this animated continuity, he's gone.
Okay, yeah, so he's gone now. So
because also the Hush adaptation was the penultimate one before they completely ended that entire storyline universe, and then it rebooted again after Justice League Apocalypse War.
Okay.
And everybody eats it in that movie if you ever get around to it.
Oh, really? Cool.
Oh, everyone eats it. Trust me.
I love being surprised by stuff like that. That sounds great.
Yeah, I wanted to mention something about animation just to top it off. There, I believe, unless I'm missing one, there have been 2 animated adaptations that really made it a point to keep the art style from the comics. One was Justice League, the New Frontier adaptation, which had the Darwin Cook art front and center. And
I've read it, haven't seen it.
And the second one was when they adapted the Superman Batman series, where they introduced Supergirl and Apocalypse and Darkseid being the villain, where they had Michael Turner's art style again front and center. Those would but
that was Michael Turner on a budget as well, though.
But it was
pretty good.
But you recognize it. You recognize it.
Yes.
So I recognize Jim Lee in this animated universe because it was the consistent one throughout. Everything that came before it was, okay, how much are we getting and who is going to animate it? Because if you look at the Flashpoint Paradox, if you look at Justice League, but War of Two Earths, everything is different depending on who's animating it.
Okay, but how did you feel? And this is, I think now we are just discussing the animation. I do want to keep going on about Hush, but I do have one more animation thing. How do you feel about the Dark Knight Returns with Peter Weller?
I thought it was great.
I thought that was an actual, that was a film from beginning to end. It felt like a book. How many issues were there in the Dark Knight Returns? 4 or 6?
4.
4. So it made more sense. This one, Hush did feel sort of episodic, even though it's not long. It's an hour and 20.
Most of these movies were either an hour and 20 or 70 minutes long.
Yeah, but wasn't Dark Knight Returns? It was in 2 parts. It was 2.5 hours long.
Right, but it was 2 hours 28 minutes, but they split it into 2 parts. So
yes,
but you can't get the combined edition as one movie. Same with Long Halloween, it was split into 2 movies, but the full Long Halloween is 2 hours 49 minutes.
That's cool. I've never seen it. How does that one match up?
There are some minor changes here and there. There are some ancillary villains that, unless you're really into comics, you don't know who they are. But it's mostly like padding in a way. But the kind of padding that is trying to kind of transition from one holiday to the other without just jumping into the next one. Because if you jump into the next one, it's going to feel like a little bit disjumbled. We're not reading a comic, we're watching a movie, so it has to flow. So they throw things in there to kind of change it a little bit, but not enough where it's unrecognizable from the adaptation. For the most part, So
you'd say it's more faithful to the comic than Hush was?
More faithful, yes. Because, again, the Hush adaptation for the movie has to abide by the rules already set from this animated movie, and everything that happens in the comics doesn't work, because in the comic books we know the history of Selina Kyle and Batman throughout. Here it's the first time we're actually seeing Selina front and center.
Okay, yeah. Because I also assume that the way that like in the comic when Two-Face gets like he fixes him and unintentionally cures him of his madness, and even though Jim is willing to temporarily put his grievances on the back burner so they can save Batman, and I'm like, okay, they did it, and they didn't really say what happened after that. So I read online for Two-Face's like character biography on Wikipedia that the reason Two-Face doesn't get or Harvey doesn't get charged for shooting Hush is because they couldn't find the body, so they couldn't really prove the murder or sure whether it was murder or not. And I'm like,
comics, yeah.
Yeah, I'm like, it's comics. I'm like, well, okay, it's great that Harvey's back. Are we just gonna forgive everything that he's done as Two-Face?
Yeah.
I guess.
And going back on the whole thing with Hush, and again, it's comics, so you have to suspend your disbelief. Going back now that after you did the whole breakdown, because it's been a while since I've read it, but I still remember the images because it's Jim Lee. How could you not remember his art style? I find that, again, it's a comic book, so I have to go by those rules, but I find it hard to believe that Tommy is such a good surgeon that not only can he do facial reconstruction and fix a brain cranial injury that almost brought Bruce Wayne to the brink of death, but he can also fix vocal cords. He can also fix psychological trauma. I'm like, you are the doctor of all doctors. God damn it.
He can fix my He's spinal, cranial. He is eyes, nose, and throat.
His mother was still alive at this time too, though, right? Because Riddler went to him and said, because initially Riddler in the comic goes to him and says, hey, I know something that can cure your mom, because he wanted money. And I'm thinking, well, if Tommy's capable of all these amazing feats, he could probably surreptitiously kill his mom without anybody knowing, But clearly, as a surgeon, he ended up getting immense wealth as well. And certainly from the Hush character in general, I'm fairly certain that Matt Reeves is not going to do a Hush movie, because it's obvious there are so many Hush references throughout their version of the Riddler in the Batman.
You would have to be more clever than the stories already available to pull it off.
Yeah, and so that's kind of why in a couple weeks I want to review, or a few weeks to review the Batman. But
haven't seen it.
Yeah, exactly. So you watch it, and now that you've read Hush recently, you can watch it, and you'll probably pick up on some of that stuff I'm talking about. But
the only sad thing about, because it's always been like a fan casting of mine, that because we got Ben Affleck as Batman, I wanted Matt Damon to play Tommy so badly. That it would have been perfect. Like,
would have been great.
They would have had to change it completely to make a brand new storyline for the Hush character. But just getting Matt Damon to play Tommy, that would have been $2 billion movie right there.
You're not wrong about that. I think that would be, everybody would love that. That certainly sounds more exciting than Batman versus Dead. I remember everybody Warner Brothers said that the Deadshot script was the best Batman script they ever read, but I admit that sounds a lot more enticing, especially since on the meta level you got Ben and Matt in there, so that'd be great.
And then you would have to find a way for Jimmy Kimmel to interview them both to promote the movie. I also wanted to bring
up on set in character in bandages and pretend to be somebody.
Exactly. It's opportunities amiss.
Yeah.
You mentioned because I finally remember, you mentioned when you were talking about a flashback in the comic when they were both kids. I really enjoy it because it reinforced, because you mentioned there was a Green Lantern, and that Green Lantern was Alan Scott from the Justice Society of America. And it wasn't until Crisis that they finally put those two together, because the Justice Society was in their own world until they put them all in the same. So that kind of reworks that, when they were kids, they were inspired by the heroes that existed in their world. And there have been many comic book storylines where Wildcat was the one who was one of the teachers that Batman visited when he was training to become the Dark Knight. And before there was a green, exactly that. There it is. Watercolor. I love that art panel. It's all in watercolor. It's brilliant.
Yeah, I love that all the flashbacks are animated that way. It's not exactly black and white entirely. It's like a hint of blue or gray tinge to it, and it's really neat. And it's like, and I love that whole backstory with Tommy. And I'm not sure which comics it is, because I haven't read all the Hush stuff, but they do extrapolate a lot on Tommy's upbringing after severing his relationship with Bruce, like his relationship with Peyton and all that.
And the brake lines on his parents' car, let's not forget. The
Yeah,
man was not squeaky clean.
no, but I do like that story and the fact that they did find a way to integrate it in a way that it wasn't immediately obvious that this was going to be the guy. Because it's like, yeah, based on the flashbacks, Tommy hasn't seen Bruce in all these years, so he wouldn't know all these villains. So you figure it can't. It's like in Scream, you think they tell you that the boyfriend is the killer. He's presented as the red herring, but no, you were right to begin with. But the way it works is because there's two, and that's how it works. And then the same thing in Hush. That
Exactly.
there's two guys. So I like how they play that twist to its effect.
But and what I like about Hush in the comics and Tommy is that when they bring him back, the stories they tell about, I'm not going to spoil anything because I know you want to get to those books, Kat. It is some of the funniest moments with the character. Because, tiny spoiler, there is a moment where Tommy is at Wayne Manor and he's trying to pass off and not be recognized. And he finally is able to infiltrate the Batcave. And there's a moment where he's walking around looking at everything and like, my God, this is marvelous. I can't believe the structure, the technology. Is that a whale? He has a whale? And I still laugh every time I look at that panel because, of course, Batman has a whale. He probably uses it to infiltrate something with a whale.
He learns
Why
about
submarine
sonar
with a
that
whale?
way.
Yeah, he learns about sonar that way.
Yeah, I do. It's interesting to sort of flash back and cultivate that jealousy of like, imagine the good that I could have done with your money.
Mm-hmm.
That's a jealousy factor from Tommy there. I don't think he's all that great.
Well, that's the thing. I don't know if in other stories they extrapolated on why he hated his parents. Like, was it simply a vanity thing that he wanted the money, or was it his relationship with them really that terrible? I mean, they don't tell you about that in the comic. It's just presented as and admittedly, they can't tell you too much about it in the comic because they don't want to give it away. But I would assume there's more on that in other stories.
Yeah, they touch upon it. Here is just like a taste of it because I think the way I took it is just that, man, you are pathetic. You are a pitiful, pathetic, sad little man. And it kind of goes into, well, they're all cowardly, superstitious lot, and you just fall under entitled, pathetic loser. Because you know that documentary where they examine the psychology of Batman and they kind of pair him up with his rogues gallery, that the Penguin is money and corruption with money, you know, Penguin, he wants money, but it's corrupted. Batman, he uses money for good. You have the Joker, which is the other side of the coin of Batman. You have Two-Face, which is dual personalities with the secret identity and all that stuff. Tommy, I look at him, you can put him adjacent with Penguin as entitled, whiny little bitch.
Yeah.
Well, and hence, hush, little baby, don't say a word.
Exactly.
Well, that's the thing. That's another funny thing is that initially, like Riddler says, the reason they called it Hush because they're going to keep it a secret. But that Scarecrow, because he's also a brilliant psychiatrist and psychologist, picks up on the fact that this is what your real problem is. Like you're never going to be satisfied. It's like, yeah, you killed your parents so you can get the money. It didn't really work out, but you ended up finding another way to get the money by way of being a brilliant surgeon. But rather than being satisfied with that, after all these years, just because Riddler proposes something with Bruce, you're now going to go after him and do this whole thing. And it's like, you haven't thought about this guy or been in the same room with him for like, what, 20 years, 25 years. And now you're just suddenly going to make it seem like he's your arch enemy. I got to do all. And it's like, yeah. And that's why Scarecrow just runs through the whole thing. It's almost like he's surreptitiously telling Batman who it is, you know?
Yeah. Do you remember when after The Dark Knight came out, I think it was around the time when Inception was coming out, that we were starting to hear rumblings of the next Batman movie for The Dark Knight Rises, and wanted to know who was going to be the villain and everything. And I remember the message boards on the Movie Web channel when we were there, that Nolan is like, oh, I'm just going to keep that hush hush for now. And everybody went insane because he thought that was a telltale sign of, oh my God, is Hush going to be the next villain? And just like, no, he just said hush hush.
Yeah. Well, I remember the month before The Dark Knight came out, they put out that great article that says, will the Joker be recast in Batman 3 or will the Riddler take his place? And it was based on the fact that there were already rumblings that the studio not only desperately wanted him to make a third Batman movie because they were so confident that The Dark Knight was going to do big business, but that they wanted Leonardo DiCaprio for the Riddler, and that Nolan said no because that's just repeating the same type of psychological type villain which you just did. But yeah, I remember it was that comment thread got over 1,000 comments, and I was on. That was a fun comment thread. But the hush hush thing, I remember that too. And at one point, the rumors got so out of control that a reporter interviewed Philip Seymour Hoffman, not in a formal interview. This was like he was walking down the street, and they were talking to him and he agreed to be on camera, and he's like in his regular street clothes. And they asked him about the Penguin rumors, and he had even heard about it. He's like, "Yeah, I hear about this, and I might be playing."
Yeah.
People say I might be playing the Penguins. Like, I haven't heard anything, but he's like, "Yeah, I'd love it. It'd be great."
And then there was a fan art that came out after that where you had Sam Neill as what's his name? The Alice in Wonderland character. I always forget his name.
Oh, Mad Hatter?
Yeah, they wanted him as Mad Hatter. Philip Seymour Hoffman was dressed as the Penguin. You had Tom Hardy as Black Mask, and you had I forgot if it was Johnny Depp or Leonardo DiCaprio as the Riddler.
It was Johnny Depp. You know, for a little while I thought, because maybe I'm just getting
great stand posters, by the way. Those
they
were
were.
Yeah,
they were.
But wasn't there a Joseph Gordon-Levitt Riddler?
No, people wanted a Michael C. Hall Riddler. He played Dexter Morgan on the Dexter show.
Right, I remember that, and I was like, no.
And I was like,
no.
Yeah, I said no. But a lot of people on MovieWeb anyway were going on about that, and that made the rounds on other sites. But it was the same kind of thing where people kind of forgot that, Nolan didn't write those movies based around what villain do we want to bring. It's like, what journey is Bruce going to go on? What natural conflict would arise from that? And then the villain naturally presents itself. So that just kind of became a different thing. But we're not going to dive into that too much right now. We'll save that for the Nolan trilogy. But yeah, Hush is a wildly popular character.
I can't even talk about alternate casting for the Riddler because I haven't yet seen the Batman. And the reason I haven't seen the Batman is because I disagree.
You're not the Riddler. Because
I
you're not
disagree
the Riddler. You wanted
with
to
the
be
casting.
The
No, I would have taken Lucas Hawes over Paul Dano.
I could see that. He's a really good actor. I wish he was in more stuff.
But
that's Kat knows. Kat and I have been arguing about this since the Batman came out. I just don't think it. Hashtag not my Riddler.
Hashtag it should have been me.
Well, I don't have a green hat.
That's something else Ernesto and I were talking about last night, that you would make a great Riddler if we were to do
That's a great compliment. I don't take that in any offense.
No, we're not insulting it. We're saying that it would be fantastic for you to play the record. I could totally picture it.
Yeah, I could totally see with a bolo hat. Perfect.
Yeah.
It's just the headphones. The headphones wouldn't fit over the brim.
Yeah.
You be the Riddler. I'll be the Penguin from Batman Returns, and Ernesto can be. Who would you want to be, Ernesto?
Are you going to be Hugo Strange?
That's an animated movie I would love to see. Prey,
yeah.
I remember he was the villain that was rumored for Dark Knight 3 for a while too, because Gary Oldman let slip that there's another villain, one of the really old ones. Of course, he was referring to Scarecrow, but people kind of forgot about the fact that he cameoed in the second one, so he might be back in the third, and they assumed that who's another really old villain they could bring in, and they thought Hugo Strange. And I got on that train for a while too. I thought, that'd be awesome.
And somebody floated Robin Williams as Hugo Strange, and we've been like, wait a minute, we're onto something here. Yeah. I think another thing about the Hush comic is that, and again, I'm trying not to reveal any spoilers because I don't know if you've read the storyline or not, but history does repeat itself with the Hush character when Scott Snyder did Batman Eternal, which was 52 comics released in a year, and this is a whole year-long storyline, and Hush does make a comeback. And as you're reading that book, it's been a while because that's 52 comics. That's a whole week you have to dedicate to reading that.
They did put out an omnibus of that, by the way.
Yeah, and exactly. So when you read Batman Eternal, it does echo the Hush storyline because it's Batman, his entire rogues gallery, and it's not just Batman, it is the Bat family having to deal with everything that's going on. And it's just like, this is Hush 2.0. And guess what? Here's Hush.
Yep. I have that on my wish list.
Yeah. And it's another thing that I like about that series, regardless of the highs and lows, for the most part, that was a great run because just like the Hush, you are not just going through the entire rogues gallery of Batman, you are giving an opportunity to characters that you don't see that often in comics because they're C-listers, they're D-listers, they're bottom of the barrel. I mean, hell, there's a moment in the Scott Snyder run where he dedicates a whole chapter to the Polka Dot Man.
Mm.
And the Polka Dot Man, he's really out of it. And at one point, he kind of breaks the fourth wall and says, somehow this is not your average Batman story. And for a while, a lot of Batman stories weren't your average Batman stories. They were these sweeping epics, horror thrillers, supernatural to the nth degree. It's amazing.
Yeah. So that's especially with a character like Hush, where it's all about mystery and what's going on and like diversion tactics and stuff like that. It could be really fun to play around with it, which is why I even think at the end of the Batman, when Joker's like, you know what Gotham really loves? A comeback. And I thought that's kind of what Riddler made is in the movie version of Hush. He says, oh, I needed to make a comeback. I needed to reinvent myself. So I'm like, well, with all the Hush references in that first movie, maybe you'll be seeing her come back more like Hush. And see, I could definitely picture him doing that before putting on the green suit with the, the hat and all that. But maybe who knows? But
come on, that's what I live for, Kat. What are you talking about? I want to see the suit. Put on your damn wrestling clothes.
Would you compromise to the Riddler having a ponytail and scarring the exclamation point right here and just being bare chested the whole time?
You know, it's kind of funny now that Colin Farrell is being so highly regarded for the prosthetics that he wore playing the Penguin. When I remember when he wore prosthetics while he was playing Bullseye, and no one was impressed. No, I didn't like that, and I didn't like that aspect of Hush. I didn't like it at the end when the question mark was like carved into his forehead. I thought that was almost as bad as Damaged. I thought it was cheap in terms of an adaptative. Like, I understand you had to have your big explosive punch fight. Having just watched, I'm surprised because some of the beats, you bring back Andrea, you bring back Tommy, kind of the same thing, someone from his youth, and then emotional manipulation ensues. It seemed rather similar. And so as soon as it was like, and Thomas Elliott, and I was like, bad guy. It was a neat twist with the first time that I read it. It was a neat twist that the Riddler was just the manipulative one, and he was trying to be like, everyone thinks I'm a fucking schmuck.
And he is.
And he is. That's why he has to prove himself. He could use his intellect for good, but instead he uses it for evil.
On that note, there is actually a short comic book storyline where the Riddler is actually doing good, and he's being manipulated by the Batman to solve a case.
Nice.
Just because of hey, you're capable of doing good.
Yeah.
Yes.
I just wish that DC would do more like Elseworlds one shots, so they don't have to worry about the continuity, kind of like they did with Earth 1. I have the first 2 volumes of that. The 3rd volume was published in June 2021, but still no softcover version. Maybe they won't put one out on that. But I like that. I feel that they should do more one shots for characters like some of their icon, like Riddler. The fact that the people consistently rate Hush as the best Riddler story when he's it's like maybe we could write another one or like Penguin. What's the best Penguin story? And then people were kind of hesitating to find because he's more of a staple in terms of running the Iceberg Lounge and having this kind of tenuous relationship with Batman than being like the supervillain type.
He's like an expensive informant.
Yeah, exactly. He's an expensive informant.
Yeah, but okay. So what if like I got some vibes off of with Hush that there was sort of like a Sam and Ilsa from Casablanca relationship going on. What if you did that for the Penguin? What if you gave him like a Nora Freeze, or I don't know?
Cobblepot's not that complex, unfortunately.
Well, no, dude likes to get down. That's what I understand. He's a rather sexual, libidinous man.
Think of Penguin as Kingpin light. He keeps a level of control around the underbelly of Gotham City.
Kingpin got a wife, a mourned wife, or a mourned lover. Is that the way you soften the Penguin? How do you do it?
Because he has his bitches.
Yeah, Kingpin was a bit more of a softie underneath all the outside. Like, he's able to be intimidating and all that for his business, but the fact that he's clearly able to separate his business life from his personal life, like he actually does have, like in the Daredevil series, it's not a put on when he has interested in his girlfriend and the things that she's interested in. He likes it too, Penguin is more abrasive. He's kind of, you can take him more or less at face value. He's like this abrasive guy, a bit vulgar, likes running the club. He does get off on the control. He loves having control and power over all of these things.
No heart of gold. Okay, I got you.
He's
Right.
a freak. He's a freak.
Okay.
Yeah, he's free. Yeah, kind of like
I've
I
been
bet he gets
brain.
freaky too.
like
I-
Doc Cody says to him in the Batman. You know, Oz, to me, you were always just a gimp in a suit. I'll spray paint your ass, ripping out the gun. That's kind of, that's kind of who Oz is. I mean, I love that they reinvented the design of the character after Batman Returns to make him look more intimidating. I mean, they don't give him all flipper fingers and stuff, but I mean, like, see the way they designed that character in the Arkham games. Like, he's actually intimidating and scary in the Arkham games. Like, I want to go to a meeting with that guy. You know,
I think in the Arkham games, he doesn't have a monocle. Someone actually broke off a bottle and shoved it in his eye, and so it just looks like a monocle, but it's actually a horrible wound that they can't remove, or he'll die.
I think one of my favorite versions of Oswald is the series that came after the Kevin Conroy Batman Animated series was The Batman, which had a penguin that was very nimble, and he was very adept in hand-to-hand combat, and he used his umbrella as a second limb, like was like a part of him, and he was able to really go toe-to-toe with the Batman if he wanted to.
Yeah, I remember some character design choices that the Batman had.
Oh my god, the hard on you have for this movie, I swear. It's almost a hate boner. It's almost a hate
No, I
boner.
mean the cartoon. I thought you were talking about the cartoon.
Yeah, we're talking about the
gosh.
cartoon. The cartoon. When you mentioned that, I was thinking of the old Marilyn Manson-esque type Riddler. With the
Yeah,
pale
like
white skin,
the
the long
joke-
black, jet black hair, and the weird. I'm like, what the fuck is this?
Like the Joker looked like a werewolf.
Yeah, that was a very weird series in terms. They went all out with the designs on that.
No. That show is special. I am sorry, you will not besmirch that show. Everything about it was so different and so off the wall. Even Freeze, here's a character who because of how he's so tragic, and in the Batman, he's just a criminal. He just like to steal diamonds. Ice, give me.
See, yeah. I liked it when they sort of did an amalgamation, when they went to the Adventures of Batman and Robin, and they sort of primmed and propered up the I like classic Penguin. I like my what's his name? Burgess Meredith.
Yeah.
He's really good.
The last thing I want to bring up, just to still be on topic, is other differences between the comic and the movie. Is in the comic you have Nightwing and you have Tim Drake, and here you have Nightwing and you have Damian Wayne as the Robin, who's on sabbatical. And in the movies that came before it, they explain why he's on sabbatical. Because before then, he's already with the Teen Titans. He's already had to deal with his grandfather and the meaning of being heir to the demon. And it's one of my favorite moments in the movie because I rewatched it, where Damian calls him pissed off. Father, your choice in women continues to surprise me. And he starts giving him shit.
Well, I was watching it with a person who didn't really even know that Damian Wayne, or like kind of knew that Damian Wayne existed, but was like, why did that scene does not belong in this movie? And and just watching it with someone, and I didn't know about the continuity of the animated universe, but I did know about the history somewhat. I think I'm an okay Batman historian when it comes to the comics to a certain extent. I'll always be schooled, but happily. But what was it that when Joker gets taken away and it's like, hey, who's Robin nowadays? And then someone punches, like I think Catwoman punches him, and the person I was watching it was with, like, why was that that was a fourth wall break? And I was like, no, it wasn't. That is exactly that. And I laughed out loud when he said it, because it is, if he's getting arrested, it's like, so what are you going to do now, Joker? And it's like, I don't know, who's Robin nowadays? I thought that was hilarious.
Yeah, he's like, back to the grind. Who's Robin nowadays? But it could play as two things. It could be a fourth wall joke, and it could also be a reference to the fact that even though it doesn't happen in this continuity, he was responsible for the death of Jason Todd.
Oh, I don't believe that there's a continuity that he didn't kill Jason Todd.
There isn't a Jason Todd in this series. That's the thing.
Well,
That's what makes
you
it.
know why?
That's what makes it funny because it's referencing that he did in the comics, and it's true. Who is Robin these days? There's always a new Robin.
Always. Yes.
Yeah.
And you know what? When it comes to Robins, I got to say I'm a big Carrie Kelly fan.
Oh yeah, I like Harry.
Anyway,
Kelly. I
back to
remember-
Hush.
Yeah. The last thing that I wanted to mention is one of the points of this run, and a lot of, if you think about it, is the secret identity of Bruce Wayne. And not only was Tommy became an integral part of the Rose Gallery, but the whole storyline about Bruce Wayne's secret identity is also a plot device in future Hush storylines. So whenever you do get to those, that is still in line and keeping with that storyline. Like, and they do something very interesting with it when it comes to the later stories with Hush, and it goes into Grant Morrison's run of the Batman, and when they introduce Batman Incorporated.
Yeah, I never tipped a toe into that.
Yeah, but it goes into, exactly just how far reaching the bat symbol is in the comics. And I just wanted to mention that because there's things from that series that just carried over into more stories.
Well, c'est la vie when it comes to comic book storylines. You're going to find things that bump into each other. And that's why, and again, I mentioned it in the intro. It's just, that's why we popped it in here. We'd read the books. I didn't know that it was
Yes,
going
we know
to
you
be.
didn't know.
Also, other thing before I forget, Oracle plays a big part in the comic books, but they actually bring Batgirl into it to sort of replace Huntress.
Yeah, Batgirl wasn't necessarily replacing it. They were piggybacking off the fact that in a previous movie they were teasing her in this universe, and then this was the first time in this animated series that she actually has a speaking role, that she is part of the Bat family, and the last time we see her is unfortunately in Apocalypse War, and that's all I'm going to say.
She did.
Oh, maliciously.
It's okay.
I am not,
it's all right.
I am not kidding. If you ever touch upon that adaptation, you are going to be amazed at how far they take it when everybody eats it. I swear, I wasn't expecting it either when I saw the adaptation.
And you mentioned in terms of the continuity and how you were confused by how we were just going to drop in here and see what condition our condition was in. But like, is it a universe that you can just bounce from episode to episode and pick up what you're doing? Like, they are direct to DVD, like they are streaming released. They are intended to be features and fans look forward to them. Do you have to watch them in order?
Not everything that came out between Mask of the Phantasm up until the Flashpoint Paradox, you don't have to watch chronology. Because what's carrying over between all those movies are the voice actors and the fact that they do make references to events in a way to what happened before, but you don't necessarily have to watch them in order. Everything that happens from Flashpoint Paradox, which is Justice League War, all the way to Apocalypse War, all of that is one consistent storyline. So
how many movies are we talking?
15, 16, 17, more or less.
That's not bad. That's a couple of months of Sundays.
Like
that's
like
fun.
70 and 65% of them are Batman related.
Yeah. I don't know. Some of them look interesting. But also there's something about the animation style of that particular universe that just doesn't it doesn't gel with me. So I'm not visually as enticed as the ones, even when it is Jim Lee. Well, I guess they're all Jim Lee light. I don't know. I like to see the more concise, straight up adaptations. I don't want to get invested into a series. And that's been consistent in my entertainment for a while. And it's weird that I keep reviewing series of things.
But you can at least enjoy the ones that you can consider one-offs. You can enjoy Batman Year One. You can enjoy The Dark Knight Returns. You can enjoy Justice League, Crisis on Two Earths. You can enjoy the what am I thinking
New
of?
Frontier.
Batman New Frontier. You can enjoy Batman Assault on Arkham, which is based on the video game, the Arkham series that was coming out at the time, which features Kevin Conroy and one of my favorite versions of Joker and Harley on screen.
Wow.
Yeah.
Well, you know what? And the only reason I say this is because I want to save material for another time. But when we start talking about the video games, the more modern video games, if you wanted to trade, have you played?
I played the first Arkham game, and
Mhm.
that's all I can say.
Oh, fair enough. No, I'm interested to. I don't know how to present talking about a video game without showing, play footage. So I don't talk about playing a video game, but like I'm looking forward to talking about them just for the voice acting and sort of characterizations.
One thing I will point out that I always felt that I always poked fun at the early days of the Arkham games was that Batman, whoever was designing him, really liked George Clooney as Batman because he looks just like George Clooney under the cowl.
See, well, the first Arkham came out way before
Yeah, but
Batfleck.
really look at George Clooney's Batman and the Batman in the early stage of the Arkham series, and they look exactly alike.
Ernesto Cat knows this. Whenever I look at Batman, all I see is John Hamm.
I knew you were going to work that into this somehow.
Come on.
Whenever he's not with what's her name? I forget the one from Bridesmaid, not
Kristen
Melissa
Wiig?
McCartney. Kristen Wiig, yeah. There was he and Kristen Wiig were kind of like paired up as a couple in like 3 comedy movies, and I'm just like, you should not have that good chemistry with Kristen Wiig. What the hell? What am I missing here?
Oh, I thought
you are out of her league, sir.
I wish John Hamm all the luck in the world, and mainly because I think he's also Batman. So I guess how many batarangs?
Oh, that's right. How many do you give it, Ernesto? The Hush movie.
Out of how many?
Out of 10.
Out of 10. Okay. Going off on it being a continued story in this animated series, and with the changes they made, and I also commented that I liked it the second time, like ignoring the changes that were made and just taking it up as a straight up new version of the story. I would give it a 7.5 batarangs out of 10.
Okay, hang on a second. This is going to take a little bit more time because I have to use a pen. All right, so Ernesto, that is your movie. You're going to give it a 7?
7.5.
7.5. Would you like a little context in terms of what we've said, everything else so far? Or is that a generic, if this is a movie, it's a 7.5 out of 10?
It's a 7.5
All right.
Within the series that's following through.
Okay. And then as an adaptation of no, not as an adaptation of the comic book. As the comic book, you've read the comic book.
Yes.
What would you rate the comic book?
A 9.
9. Cat.
I would also rate the comic a 9.
Okay, makes sense. I'm going to give it a 10. So
the movie, oh man, it's hard because when comparing it with the comic, the fact that it doesn't have that same animation style artwork and some of the changes they made, I think I'll give it I'll give it 7 batarangs. 7
batarangs. All right. We watched Batman 66. We watched the Tim Burton's 2, the Schumachers. Then we watched Mask of the Phantasm. Then we came to this. I can't give this. Is it better than Batman 66? Yes. Is it better than Batman Forever? No. Is it better than Batman and Robin? Yes. So that's where I'm thinking this guy lives. Like I'm gonna put this movie up there because of the cavalcade of villains. I'm gonna put it on par with Batman 66. This is a 5.
Mm.
If the Batman is as good as I've heard, I'm gonna have to save a couple of 9s and 10s so it doesn't look like I'm showing off.
Well, I gave
But-
the comic a 9. I gave the movie a 7, which is like a C, or it looks better than a C, but 7 looks better.
Hey, 5 is no. I would recommend this to
Yeah.
people who like Batman. Like, if you like Batman, I would
Yeah.
recommend this. But it's out of the last 5 movies that we've seen, 6 movies that we've seen. This one, measuring them up, this one's not really. This isn't on par. Well, no, this is on par with Batman 66. I appreciate the craftsmanship. The story did what I wanted it to do. I prefer the original source material, much like Batman 66.
I think the story is a lot more cohesive than Batman 66.
Sometimes you just can't get rid of a bomb.
Yes. All
But
right.
yeah,
And of course,
So-
there's a reminder we all
And there's always shark repellent.
always in cans, no less. All right, I've neglected the chat all evening. I wanted to say hello to everyone who was here an hour and a half ago. Edge of Time, ahoy, Bat fans! Thanks, Edge of Time, for being here. Daniel's Hot Topic says, "Hello, Scotty and Kat. How are you tonight? I just got back home now. Welcome, Daniel. And hello, Edge of Time. Let's see." Daniel says, "I have heard of Batman Hush. If you haven't, and obviously we're saying book before movie.
Yeah, of course.
I heard Batman will enter the public domain in 2035.
Yeah.
Mhm. Yeah, just like Mickey Mouse, they're gonna fight to keep it out of it.
Oh yeah. Of course.
But I live in an interesting situation because up here in the Canada, James Bond, like Ian Fleming's James Bond books, they are public domain.
Oh, silly Scott. Canada's not a real place.
No, I know. I'm imagining it as we speak.
Indeed.
But no, I'm just saying, like, and the problem is that you can't use any of the trademarks that were made famous by the film, so you're not it's a whole thing. Yes, the intellectual property that things are based on. But if you reintroduce the original, will it do as well? I don't know. And also lawyers, lots and lots.
Lots and lots
Of
of
lawyers.
expensive lawyers. One
Captain
of them is Harvey
Finity.
Dent.
Two of
One
them,
them is
actually.
Harvey- Yeah. 2, yes, exactly.
Captain Finity says Batman never kills except when he does.
Yeah.
And I
I
agree.
agree.
Outstanding. Mad Hatter, Max Schreck in Batman Returns is the best. Oh. Part of the Mad Hatter. You know what? I'd have to go deeper into the Mad Hatter. I don't really know the origins of that villain, except for the fact that he is the Mad Hatter.
He's kind of like in a way, he's a serial rapist because he's always kidnapping
Alice's.
Alice's people who run him with his sister. So he I would put him in the same category as Professor Pig. Just not someone who can be redeemed, period.
Just another bad person.
Just another bad person, but intellectually up there. Let's put it that way. Because he does a lot of brain manipulation. So
That was one of the creepiest things in the Arkham Asylum game, where you're walking through the sewers of Arkham and you just hear him having his tea party, and you can't get to him because the bars are like blocking through the cell and you can't cut through it or anything. You just hear him talking about, oh, is that a dream, and kind of laughing and doing this weird thing, and it's like, I want to go back there. And I thought it was like foreshadowing that you'd be able to find him or meet him, but you don't.
yeah. And one of my favorite moments of Batman engaging against the Mad Hatter during the New 52 is Batman. They were kind of trying to do the storyline where Batman meets this woman who was going to be the new love of his life during the reboot, and he was getting ready to give it up and just not be Batman anymore. And then Mad Hatter manipulates her into walking off a building and falling to her doom. And Batman goes after Mad Hatter. And as he's going through his Wonderland, you have Tweedledee and Tweedledum trying to stop him. And Batman, without thinking twice, just punches one of the twins so hard you can see his jaw just dislodging and just hanging there loose. And the guy's like this.
You know, it's them Kevlar knuckles that do the most damage.
They do.
Man, I don't know. I think I'm too short to be Batman. Hey, Jedi Bill.
So was Michael Keaton.
Yeah, I guess. You get lifts. So, Kat, that ends the chat. Yeah. No, I think everyone was just enthralled with the level of information.
This is too nerdy. I gotta get out of here.
Surprising. I thought there would have been a much bigger chat tonight because this is a popular character and all that kind of thing.
Well, we did have a discussion before we went live, and you said, you know, only the hardcores will be here for the comic book talk. It's the live action stuff that the regular people want. And I said, you damn Skippy.
So what's next on the menu?
Next week we're taking off because I have a meeting with some friend from LA is coming up, and so that'll be that. And February 15th we're gonna do Sub-Zero and Heart of Ice for Valentine's Day.
Yes.
All right. I'll be
That'll
there.
be also Wednesday. It's Wednesday the 15th at 6. You're invited, of course.
I said I will be there.
He
Awesome.
just said, Kat, stop badgering.
Because
You already said.
I will be there, and this time I'll make sure you do it right.
Yeah. Well, this
I will.
fun.
You should have seen me last night when I was talking to Catherine, because we were zooming about James Gunn releasing the new DC slate, and I'm looking through the YouTube, and all of a sudden I have in my watch later Batman Phantasm that you guys did, and then all of a sudden when I update the YouTube app, it says scheduled tomorrow Batman Hush, and I'm like, what the hell's going on here? Whose bright idea was it to jump 15 movies?
See, I need to find a list of the comprehensive list explaining it, like a Wikipedia page or something, explaining this continuity and all the titles involved and what the general story arc is.
Okay. And also, we did watch Never Say Never Again. We did watch
Casino Royale 67.
Destiny Turns on the Radio.
Oh, yep.
Like we are having fun with Batman. And the thing is, and I think like I'm interested in some of these adaptations. I know Steve's a big fan of Under the Red Hood, and I've never seen that. But I don't know how long I want to hang out in Gotham. I thought we were going to do with the live action cinematics. The freeze is because we do want to give justice to Victor Freeze, because Schwarzenegger did a boy dirty. But like but I didn't know how deep it was gonna go. Like whenever we start these shows, Kat's like, and then we'll play all the James Bond video games and we'll read all the novels. And I'm like, of course we will.
And then Vanessa's gonna give you a tip.
Well, the Batman series is going to be fun, though. So I feel like Batman. And that doesn't mean you have to critique every animated film. I think Steve only mentioned a couple that he wanted us to do. But seminal ones like The Long Halloween, because that's like, long. Whereas we decided to skip The Killing Joke because that wasn't a very good film adaptation, or some mixed. And, everybody kind of knows that story. And I feel that could be part of I could talk about The Killing. If we review Under the Red Hood like Steve wants us to, then I could recap The Killing Joke and talk. We'd be talking about so many things there anyway. That's like,
Yeah. Or you can just review about how not to adapt a comic book.
Exactly.
Well, and we could even do a shorter one just on the books. Like I like the idea of doing ones that have been adapted, but I have no interest in watching The Killing Joke.
Yeah, don't. Like I remember one critic said, yeah, you could just start at like 40 minutes in when the actual Killing Joke part of the movie begins. But
I just think the artwork is like, that's one of those ones. You don't really see a lot of Bruce in The Killing Joke, so, but like it's one of those ones where I would rather read the book for the artwork than watch the movie. I would rather put on the score while I read the book than actually watch the adaptation. And
Yeah, at the end of
like,
the day, the problem with the adaptation was when Alan Moore wrote it, it was ambitious. When Bruce Timm adapted it, there was no ambition.
and when I saw Damian Wayne in Hush, when I saw Batgirl, and then when I reread, and I was like, no, I wanted Oracle. When I lost those things in favor of, like, when I lost Killer Croc, I was like, when I started watching it again, like when I started watching it, the only thing I knew is that it started off with Killer Croc. This is basically all I know about Killer Croc. So it's a distorted version. I know he's a big Killer Croc, and then the Arkham games. But
then you've deprived yourself of every time he says, and then I threw a rock at him.
Oh no, I do know Killer Croc from the. You're right, I do know from the animated series. But come on, can you take that character design seriously? He's got like a trap jaw. Anyway,
So no, He-Man and the Masters of the Universe.
Well, but that was on a different planet, so I accepted it more.
Fun fact: they do crossover with the DC Comics.
So does Judge Dredd. So does the Xenomorph.
And so does my left foot up your ass.
Yeah, well, and it's going to be an animated adaptation by Bruce Timm with the voice characterization of Andrew McCarthy.
And it starts with a tip up your ass.
Right there. Wingtip. But yeah, I'm looking forward to that. And then after that, where are we going? Because we did want to get to some more live action.
Yeah, we're going to do The Batman on March 1st because that's going to be the year anniversary for the week that came out and has, like I said, a lot of Hush references in that movie. And then we'll seek into the Dark Knight trilogy.
I like it a lot. And we still haven't decided whether or not we're doing Joker.
I mean, we could if you want to. I forgot about that one.
I don't know. I don't know.
What do you want, Scott?
My face on a $1 bill.
Scott, what do you want? Tell me what you want, and I can give it to you. Don't make me beg.
No, so we'll do what Kat said.
Oh, I got you speechless for a second. You had no idea what to do. I got you.
No, but your eyes were so brilliant. I got taken in. It was like looking into pools of reflection.
Hey.
Don't make me. No, stop it.
Baby.
Now who's the Mad Hatter?
Oh, you haven't seen Mad yet, baby.
Oh, you sound like
I'm the best thing to ever happen to you. You must be mad as that.
Someone clip that. Make it my ringtone. All right. Well, then I suppose. Do we do the internet prompting and then we go?
Yeah, you could find me at Slice Night on Twitter, Instagram, and YouTube. Twitter, Instagram, and YouTube. You can find maybe not on Twitter. I heard Elon Musk is deleting accounts that haven't been used in a while. I can't remember my password. Haven't logged in months. And you can find me every second and fourth Sunday of the month on the Virtual Cantina Network YouTube channel, live streaming at 8 a.m. Pacific on the Unifying Force Star Wars talk show. Fun. And then here every Wednesday night.
Talking about Batman until we die. Ernesto, where do people find you on this glorious tube that is you?
If you have nothing better to do, you can find me on Twitter at MartinezXYZ Cinematic Universe. And if you're interested in reviews I've done with Kat and other people from 2014 to 2017, where I simply just gave up, you can find me on Cinematic Universe Ultimate on YouTube's.
That was a fun show.
It was.
I miss it. But yeah, we might have an exciting podcast coming down the line.
Yeah. All I can say about that is as soon as I get stuff in my personal life settled, then I can actually start getting serious about setting that up.
Yeah.
Oh, just treat it like a pool. The water's fine. Jump in and then hope to God it works.
No, don't jump in. Make sure your father grabs you from behind and throws you in without you knowing. That's the only way you're
Exactly.
gonna learn. That's the
Yeah.
only way you learn. The hard way, not with the kiddie pool.
And yeah, I'm here, and I hang out with Pop Culture Curator, and we are finishing up reviews of the animated series. I hang out with Jill, and we talk about the original series of Star Trek. I get to hang out with Kat and talk about whatever she agrees to talk about for weeks at a time. We're currently doing Batman, and next week is going to be nothing.
Yeah.
Absolutely nothing.
And so then, but tomorrow, I usually talk with Jill about Quantum Leap. We're not doing that. Tomorrow is Groundhog Day. So we're going to talk about Groundhog Day tomorrow. And that's all I got planned so far.
Isn't a new steelbook coming out for that movie?
Mm-hmm.
I'm not sure.
Yes. It might already be out. I'm not sure.
Might be. Maybe it might be out for Groundhog Day.
I'm watching the Blu-ray for the first time, so I'm looking forward. It's no 4K steelbook, but we get by.
You know what you should get as a 4K steelbook? A new remastered Dragon Slayer.
That's right. That's coming March 21st.
Peter McNichol.
Mm-hmm.
I wouldn't
love
mind
that movie.
I wouldn't mind seeing it again. I attempted to rejoin a little bit of the fantasy community in lead up to watching Lord of the Rings. I couldn't stomach Lord of the Rings, but on my way there, I really liked Lady Hawk and I liked Legend. So I don't know what's wrong with me.
Hey, if you ever want to talk about dragons, I recommend Dragon Slayer, Dragonheart, and Reign of Fire as a good.
Reign of Fire is awesome, but
Reign of Fire to dragons is what Deep Blue Sea is to sharks.
That is true. And well, thank you for the dragons and the suggestions. I'm assuming that had something to do with Killer Croc. And
oh, no, Scott, thank you.
And Kat, I never said thank you.
And you'll never have to.